It was Todd Buffalo that said to me, Diane, is this company ever going to make a profit? You think we'll ever make $1 million in a year? And I said, no, I don't think we'll ever make $1 million in a year. That's a lot of money, but we will definitely make a profit. Last year, they made a $15 million profit. The year before, it was 21 million.
You had 24 brokers signed to a brand new unknown insurance company before you'd written a single policy. How?
Both Bill and I had excellent relationships with the insurance community in Alberta. And we went out to these 24 brokers and said, okay, tell us what insurance company has the best wordings? Which company has the best manual? What do you like best about this? And so we really worked hard at taking bits and pieces of all of our competitors and making what we felt was the best product and the best wordings, the best manual for the brokers to use.
Peace Hills has over 350 employees, $500 million a year in premiums, and over 200,000 policyholders. To achieve consistent, profitable growth, what were some of those things that were really difference makers in that regard?
To me, the biggest thing that made Peace Hills continuously profitable and still today is the relationship that we have with our brokers.
Diane, I'm really excited about this. I've been really deep in going through the whole Peace Hills story these past couple weeks. And fortunately, there's a book out there. There's some great videos on the story of Peace Hills, which I understand why. It is a really interesting, very unique company history. And one of the things I was curious about is, can you walk us through those meetings where you're discussing Peace Hills profit right before you took over as president and CEO?
Well, there wasn't any Peace Hills profits before I took over. I took over as CEO in 1991. So 10 years, pretty much 10 years from when the company first started. And we didn't have any profits. I mean, the company suffered for the first 10 years. And consequently, that was the main reason why they made a CEO change. So they parted company with the first CEO and asked if I would just come in as interim until they could find a permanent replacement. So of course, I said yes. I hired all these people. I couldn't turn my back on them. So the first thing I had to do as the CEO was go out and ask the shareholder for an injection of capital because, of course, we were so heavily regulated as an insurance company and we needed to have a certain amount of capital to continue to keep the company going. Bill had done this. The previous CEO had done this every year for pretty much 10 years. And it was difficult. And I remember him coming back after those meetings. That was a tough day for him to go out and ask for that money. And so it was even tougher for me because I had never done it before. And I to be honest with you, I was scared to death. Anyway, so I made the drive. It was about an hour drive out to what was called Hobima at the time to visit a shareholder. They were having a chief and council meeting because, as you know, the company's solely owned by the Samson Cree Nation. Anyway, so I went out there. They were having a council meeting, and I met with them, and they called me into the meeting room. And so I explained to them that, the company did not have a good year. We needed $750,000 to keep the company going. And so we, went around the table. They asked questions. And I remember, I think it was Todd Buffalo that said to me, Diane, is this company ever going to make a profit? And I said, absolutely. Absolutely. I have no doubt in my mind that we are going to make a profit. Yes. And he said to me, you think we'll ever make $1 million in a year? And I said, no, I don't think we'll ever make $1 million in a year. That's a lot of money. But we will definitely make a profit. And then last year, they made a $15 million profit. The year before, it was 21 million. So the company did well from about that point on, and we never looked back. So
I love that story. And just to kind of double down on what you just mentioned, shortly after that, when I say shortly after it, as I understand it, you became the president and CEO, which you also became Canada's first female insurance company president and CEO. And you really built it into what it is today. And for those that aren't aware, Peace Hills has over 350 employees, a $500 million a year in premiums, and over 200,000 policyholders. And then on top of that, you were just elected to the Junior Achievement Hall of Fame. So some may hear that story and say, I don't know, maybe Diane was just setting a low bar just so she can blast through any expectations.
Well, it was a pretty low bar. You're absolutely right.
And, I alluded to this earlier, but it's when you look at those numbers now, it's easy to assume that it was always going to work out. But I'd love to kind of dive into the story of Peace Hills because I think it's so interesting. When you joined, this wasn't even, it really wasn't even a company yet. And there's 3 people, an idea, a check had not arrived yet. And you were also walking away from 8 years. And as I understand it, you were really on the rise at Royal Insurance. Why? What made you take that leap?
Truly, a lot of people ask me that question, including my husband. To start with, you're right. I did have a great career path with the Royal Insurance Company. They were amazing to me. They treated me exceptionally well. I was, sent to Toronto 3 or 4 times a year for education. I was the first female on the road. I was, it was a great job, and they were a fantastic company. And then one day I got a call from a fellow by the name of Bill Holt. And I didn't know Bill well. I knew of him because the insurance industry in Alberta was fairly small. And so I had heard his name. I knew of him, but I didn't know him. And he asked if I would have lunch with him. And I said, sure. So we went out for lunch. And by the time the lunch was over, he had convinced me that I wanted to give up the career that I had with the Royal, and that I wanted to be part of something that was new, was unique, was an adventure, was exciting. I went home that night and discussed it, as I said, with my husband. He's shaking his head and saying, I don't quite understand, but if that's what you want to do, you go for it. And I did. I did. And of course, my boss was devastated. Devastated was probably not a good word, but he was, why would you do this? And so many people did ask me, why would you do this? I never once asked myself that after the day I walked into that office. It was like, yeah, this is where I belong. It was a great, great career.
For you, was it the opportunity to build something? Was that you liked the idea of it? Did you think that they were doing something, or they wanted to at least do something differently? What did that look like?
Well, yes, and it was an opportunity to do something new and exciting. And not that I was bored with what I was doing, but the opportunity to start something from nothing, to build something that opportunity doesn't come up. I think the last time an insurance company in Alberta was started was, I don't know, like 20 some years prior to this. And to start a new insurance, the startups were not something back in the 80s. You'd never heard the word startup. So we were one of the first startups to start up. And it was exciting. And so I can't really put my finger on why I accepted, but I did feel that it was an opportunity that I couldn't let pass.
Almost as if it was a calling. And, one of the things you had alluded to this, but they lay this out in the book specifically, and they said there was 4 or 5 reasons why this really shouldn't have even happened. How difficult that was to pull that off. Insurance companies aren't usually for sale. The purchase and startup costs are enormous. A new one could only be incorporated through an act of legislature. That process can take years. And as far as anyone knew, there had never been a First Nations-owned insurance company anywhere in North America. How did you pull this off? How did that early team pull this off?
Well, that happened before I came on board. But what ended up happening is the Samson Cree Nation were receiving a huge amount of money from oil royalties that were on their reserve. And their chief and council knew that at some point that the oil industry or the oil on their reserve would be depleted. And they knew that they needed to take some of this money and invest it into something that, as they said, a very long-term investment, an investment for their grandchildren's grandchildren, or a very long-term investment. And they did hire a consultant that worked with them, and he recommended a banking facility and an insurance company. So in 1980 or 81, they started Peace Hills Trust, which is a banking facility. And then in 1982, they started Peace Hills Insurance. But that started prior to 82. So you're right. To start an insurance company, it would take a tremendous amount of money and a tremendous amount of time to go through the regulators and legislation and et cetera, et cetera. So one of the fellows that they contacted, his name is Tom Sad, and he also partnered with a fellow from Newfoundland, Rex Anthony, and the two of them were quite instrumental in the startup of the organization. And they came across a dormant charter, and it was the Edmonton Canadian Insurance Company, and it was owned by Canadian Surety, which you're too young to remember who Canadian Surety was. Anyway, it was a dormant charter, had been sitting there for how long, I have no idea. And so they approached them and offered to buy the charter from them. And so we fortunately were able to get a charter that had already gone through all of the regulations and the legislation, et cetera, et cetera. And for a very small amount of money, I think it was $500,000 or something, they were able to purchase this charter. And all we had to do was apply to the regulator to change the name. And so from the Edmonton Canadian Insurance Company, it was changed to Peace Hills Insurance. And they wanted it to be Peace Hills because the land and the property around where their residents are, the reserve is called Peaceful Hills. And so that was important to them for the insurance company to be called Peace Hills Insurance. So
you pull this off. And so one, miraculous that you could pull that off. And then number two, you talked about this a minute ago, there hadn't been a new insurance company in a very long time in Alberta. And before anything was even, you had 24 brokers signed to a brand new unknown insurance company before you'd written a single policy. How did that happen?
Well, Bill had some huge connections, of course, because of his past and his personality, and his reputation in the industry was excellent. And so he approached 12 brokers, and I approached 12 that I had done business with and had a great relationship with at the Royal. And as it turned out, I could be just as convincing as Bill could be. And they were excited. It's interesting. The brokers that we approached, not one of them said no, not one of them. And they were just as excited about this new opportunity as we were. But also what was amazing was our competitors. When we started, I started December of 1981, as did Brenda, who was Bill's executive assistant. And her and I started with Bill, working with him on December 14th, 1981. And we had to put together all of our wordings and our rates and our brokers' contracts, et cetera, et cetera. And our competitors brought their manuals to us and said, here, take these, use them if you want, take what's best out of each one of them or what you want. We would like to see you succeed. We don't want to see somebody come into the insurance industry and fail. Both Bill and I had excellent relationships with the community and the insurance community in Alberta, which was very fortunate because, as I said, the brokers supported us and our competitors also supported us, which was excellent. Now that didn't last long because once we became quite successful, then of course it was a different story. But in the beginning, they were fantastic, and the brokers were great. And as I said, our competitors were great too. So we spent from December until February putting together our wordings. And we went out to these 24 brokers and said, okay, tell us what insurance company has the best wordings, which company has the best manual. What do you like best about this? And so we really worked hard at taking bits and pieces of all of our competitors and making what we felt was the best product and the best wordings, the best manual for the brokers to use. The unfortunate part was we put our rates together, our auto rates together, and our property, of course. And the auto rates had to be approved by the Alberta regulator, the Auto Rate Board, it's called. And so we put our auto rates together, and we waited so long for the check to arrive that by that time, within those 6 months, every one of our competitors increased their auto rates. And so part of the problem with not making a profit for all those years was because our prices were so low. And our regulator would not allow us to increase the price because we didn't have enough statistical information and background to warrant an increase. So we were underpriced for a number of years, and business just flooded in the door. Just once we started writing business, it just was a crazy amount of business that came in.
To add on to that, one of the things that I was curious about that, because I know that was one of the things from just a timing perspective, that was one of those uphill challenges or uphill battles in the early days. And then on top of that, in 1987, an F4 tornado struck Alberta, and it was a huge tragedy that killed 27 people and injured over 300. And I found that this was often mentioned in the history of Peace Hills because it was such an important event. Can you walk us through that time? Peace Hills was still a very new company. What did that look like? What did the recovery from that event look like?
We're a very small company, and you're right. And we had only been in business by that time for 5 years. So we didn't have a huge market share. But we had enough business that this tiny little company felt the impact significantly. And our reinsurers were extremely great. Learned very quickly what it was like to have a cat and a catastrophe loss. And so our claims people, the whole company, it did not matter. It wasn't just claims people. It was underwriters. Everybody pitched in and took claims calls, answered questions, whatever it took. It didn't just stop with the claims department. We were so small, and we were just such a close family that it taught us a lot. It taught us, and we learned a lot because the insureds that we did business with, they thought we were excellent. They thought we were great because we were so attentive to them. And we looked after them so well that, in that very short period of time, our brokers totally loved the way Peace Hills handled our claims files. For us, it was a small cat. It was a huge cat for a lot of insurance companies, but because we were so small, we didn't suffer greatly for that year. I can't remember what our results looked like for 1987, but it was not a huge loss for us, but it was a huge loss for the industry for sure.
It's one of those things I have found this time and time again in the businesses that I've worked at, and it's a theme that's came up on the show quite a bit, that, when you're going through those things, that you just hit this to the T, the power of just making sure that service is good. Whether you need to over-service it, whatever that might be, just making you're responsive, you're on it, that stuff carries through. And I've noticed, and I'd be curious if this was the case, you get a little bit of leeway down the road when there's things that are either out of your control or things that are in your control and are just mistakes. You get some grace on that. Did you find that to be the case?
What we did internally was we learned how we wanted to treat our insureds going forward, what they appreciated and what the brokers appreciated. And it didn't stop. We had 19... I can't even remember the year that we had a slave-like fire. And there was magazine articles that came out that said Peace Hills Insurance was the best company from a claim standpoint to look after our insureds. And you mentioned just a few minutes ago about this award that I won last week. And a man that came up to me, actually 2 gentlemen came up to me, and one fellow said, my daughter and son-in-law were insured with Peace Hills during the slave-like fire, and we were very concerned about what was going to happen. And so I called one of my friends who's an insurance broker, and he said, well, who are they insured with? And he said, Peace Hills. And the broker said, you don't have to worry about it. They will look after you, and you will not have to worry about them. And he said that they were thrilled with the service that they got from your company. That is a thread that, and we had a huge Jasper fire in a town of Jasper in Alberta 2 years ago. Just last week, one of our brokers said Peace Hills is the best. They've looked after their clients the best. And that is important. That's just embedded in the organization. Sure. I mean, we have lots of files, and I'm sure that, our insureds are not happy with us for some reason or another, but by and large, we, that is something we really, put a lot of effort into. Years ago, for years, we'd say, we're not looking for a way to deny a claim. We're looking for a way to pay a claim. And that's kind of the thread that's been through the organization right from day one.
How do you do that? How do you foster that and maintain that? I mean, in the earlier days, much easier to do because everyone's really bought into this, and you're hiring, and this becomes a piece of it, and it can spread just in kind of just a network knowledge. But as you start to scale, how do you still maintain that and make sure that that's still at the forefront?
We have some extremely long-term employees, and in fact, interestingly enough, in the past year, we've had a number of retirees. People don't leave Peace Hills. I mean, our turnover has always been extremely low. So there's a legacy there of people that understand the culture, that understand what Peace Hills is about, and that legacy continues with new people. I think, anyone that starts, they learn about the history of the company. They learn about the culture of the company. That culture is extremely important to management today. And so, yeah, I think that just, it just grows with the company. And is it as strong? Maybe not. As the company gets larger and larger, and, now there's, instead of 3 people, there's 350 some people. Is it more difficult? Absolutely. Is it as tight a family? And no, maybe. Of course it can't be, but that strong culture is still there for sure.
And so how did you foster that culture? Were there things that you did specifically to reward and recognize the people that were living living through that culture? Or was this something that just kind of organically happened and it just kind of built on itself? What did that look like?
It comes with a lot of hard work, actually. And it comes with a lot. It's not something that just happens. It happens because we made it happen. And for example, if you go back to Bill Holt, who was the first CEO, he was excellent. He was a huge people person. And Bill built the organization as a family. And so when he left, we probably had 30 people in the organization, and we were pretty tight. But some of the things, and this is just an example of Bill and how he thought. And there was 7 of us that worked at Peace Hills at the time. And he came into my office one day and he said, "Diane, what are you doing for lunch tomorrow?" And I said, "Nothing, no." And he said, "Okay, well, you and I are going to have lunch tomorrow." I said, "Okay, great." And so he sent an inter-office memo out to this. Of course, it was handwritten because we didn't have computers or emails or any of those sorts of things. So he wrote this inter-office memo to the staff and sent it around and said to them, it was like, I don't know, early December, bring your Christmas stocking from home to the office tomorrow and hang it up because Santa's going to fill your stocking. So he and I went out and we went stocking stuffing shopping. And we filled 7 stockings before our Christmas party, took them off and filled them up and gave them to the staff when we had our little cocktail party before Christmas. And today they fill 355 stockings. And that's a big job. So the CEO goes around, collects everybody's stocking from their desk. And in our branches, the branch managers collect their stockings and they fill their stockings. And at their Christmas luncheon that each branch and head office or whatever has, they give those stockings out. And, there's a lot of ladies in our office that are maybe single moms, and they just tuck that stocking aside and they take it home and they open it Christmas morning. When there were 7 of us, it was an easy job. 355 stockings to stuff becomes a big job. And so that's just part of continuing with the culture of the organization and making the company part of what we started was if you can't have fun while you're here, if you're going to be here 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, we need to make it fun because we both Bill and I believe you can't expect people to come to this organization, sit at that desk and just crank out 8 hours a day and not enjoy themselves. And so we did things like we had the regulator change the auto industry back in 2004, I think it was. And it was stressful. I mean, claims were going to be different on October the 1st. All the claims were going to be handled differently. The underwriters had to underwrite differently. The prices had to be done. The computer system had to be changed. It was a big job, and the industry was stressed. And so I called our VPs in and I said, okay, when this day happens on October the 1st, I think we should make it fun. Everybody's so stressed about this, and we need to break that stress. And so I think we'll let everybody wear their pajamas to work that day. Our VP of claims looked at me and he said, are you kidding me? Do you have any idea what these people are going to go through on that day? And I said, yeah, I think I do. And I think we need to make sure that they understand that it's not the be all and end all, and that we need to lessen the stress. And so tell them they can wear their pajamas to work, and we'll bring in pizza for lunch. And he walked out of my office just shaking his head. And we did that. And it was, I mean, they all did their jobs. They all managed, but they knew it just broke that. And so things like that, I mean, I don't know, I'm sure lots of companies do similar things, but we tried to make it, an organization that they could go home at night and say, it was a fun day. I had a great day at work.
It seemed, I mean, there were countless examples just in the research of things like you just mentioned. It seemed like Peace Hills really wanted to ingrain that and continue to reinforce that, which I thought was really cool. One of the things I'd love to dive into here is, so go back a little bit. We talked about, the initial conversations that you had right before you became CEO. But there were a couple things that really stood out. Before you became the CEO, you received a letter from an employee named George. Can you talk about that? Can you share that story?
Of course, Bill and I were very close, and he was like my mentor. He was a great boss, and the staff just looked up to him and respected him so much. So when they parted company with Bill, and they asked if I would just step in on an interim basis, like I said earlier, I of course I couldn't say no. I remember somebody coming to me and say, we're all excited, and to say that they had just got their mortgage approved. And I'm thinking, oh my God, like I felt responsible. There is a feeling of responsibility when you hire all these people. Anyway, so when they let Bill go, I was devastated, and I had no intention of stepping in and even putting my name forward for his job, because I could not see myself filling his shoes. Like, I felt it would be disrespectful. I just couldn't see myself doing that. And then one day I did. I was sure, of course, that our brokers that had appointed us and trusted us were going to say, well, without Bill, we're gone. We'll probably cancel our contract and move on, or the employees would start looking for other jobs, etc., whatever. And so I walked in my office one morning, and there was a letter in white envelope on my desk. And I thought, oh, here's the first resignation. And it wasn't. It was a letter from George. And it was basically to say, what, we all feel the same way, that we feel that you should put your name forward, that we want you to step into Bill's job if that's possible. And you have our support. And so that changed my mind. But there was also, Brenda. Brenda came into my office one day, and she basically grabbed me like by the scuff of the neck, literally, and said, what's wrong with you? Like, what is wrong with you? Why are you moping around here like this? It takes more than one person to build this company. And we all love Bill, but you need to step in here and pull up your socks, be a big girl. So I applied for the job. I think there was others that applied, I'm assuming. And I was successful But you're right. It was a really stressful time for me because I had so much respect for that man.
That's one of the things I was curious about, because it seems like he was and you had mentioned this many times, that he was a very beloved and admired leader. For you, and you kind of just hit on this, but what was that like balancing? It's you've got a ton of admiration for this person, but at the same time, you are tasked to do the job. What did that process look like for you now moving into this position? And we'll talk about this in a little bit, but you were very successful in this position. But at that time, what was that transition like, going from that into that position?
It wasn't a transition. I just did the job. Once I got the job, when I went out and they appointed me as the CEO, I stayed in my office. I didn't move into Bill's office. I felt like I didn't feel right moving into his office. And again, like I said, I felt it was disrespectful. And then finally, the staff, pretty much the senior staff, moved me in there and said, this is where you're supposed to be, and you're not supposed to be in your office, and you're supposed to move into this other office. Anyway, so was there a transition? I don't recall that there was no light bulb that went on that said, oh, now you're the CEO. You're not the vice president of underwriting anymore. You're now the CEO. There wasn't that. I just did the job. To me, right now, when I think about it, it kind of felt like it was seamless. Bill and I worked so closely together that there was, I knew all the brokers, I knew all the reinsurers, I knew the regulators. He was the kind of partner or boss that didn't say, well, I'm going to close my door and have this private conversation with the regulator. I mean, he included me and others in everything that went on in that organization. So for me to walk into his position was not a huge transition. It wasn't like I didn't know the regulator or I didn't know this, the senior reinsurers or we worked so closely together that there was, I have to say, to be honest with you, that I don't feel that there was a transition.
Well, I mean, that is definitely a testament to what you just said to the T, right? And how to, because oftentimes there, that can be a very tough transition, especially for somebody that was very close. And it sounds like the way that the two of you operated made that seamless. So when it was time to move into there, it worked. And so, you mentioned, the relationships with your reinsurer, and as we kind of move into this next stage, one of there's a quote that I really loved, and we talked about a number of these things. So I think at this point, we have a pretty good feel on those challenges. But now as we look to this next stage, so Maureen Mackay said, everyone wanted this fledgling company to succeed and wonder if it was ever going to get a positive break. And we talked about all these things that we had just mentioned. And because there was a lot of things that happened in those early days, a lot of those were out of your control, and it made profitability a significant challenge. And then in 1992, 2 years after you became president and CEO, Peace Hills not only became profitable, but has remained consistently profitable for most all the time that you are the leader, and to this day. Can you walk us through what were some of those things that happened that led to this consistent profitability and this growth and profitable growth? I mean, the interesting thing in insurance, and you kind of hit on it, is if you've got low rates while everybody else has high rates, you can grow in insurance. That's not necessarily a good thing, obviously, unless you've got unbelievable underwriting that is seeing something that other people are not seeing. But there's been a lot of insurtechs that have tried to do that haven't successfully pulled that off. And there's been some that for sure that have done really well as well. So this isn't a knock against insurtechs, but I was curious to achieve consistent profitable growth. What were some of those things that were really difference makers in that regard?
Several things, but to me, the biggest thing that made Peace Hills continuously profitable and still today is the relationship that we have with our brokers. That relationship is extremely strong, and we underwrite our brokers as much as we underwrite the business. And if we believed, and this was our philosophy, if we had great brokers, they had great business. And if they had great business, we would be profitable. So we were very strict about the brokers that we did business with. And then once we appointed a broker, the brokers that we believed were great brokers and were profitable brokers, they gave us profitable business. The relationship that we built with them, I don't know how many times over the years that if we walked into a broker's office and said, okay, we would like to see some more growth from you, they gave us whatever we wanted. And today also, I mean, the relationship that we have with our brokers today is still extremely unique and extremely strong. Peace Hills has never, ever had a problem growing. If we said to our brokers, we need to grow in this area, they supported us. They gave us the business. And if we went to them and said, you know what, we are over, we feel we have too much capacity in this line, can you hold back and not, send us whatever? They totally respect that. And we have that, we still have that relationship with our brokers. That was one of the things that I think, we were very, very careful about who we appointed. We didn't just appoint any broker that applied to have a contract at Peace Hills. And then another thing that we did back in the early days was we strategically said, we are a small company. We know we're a small company, but we want to be a small company with a big voice. And so we strategically decided that we were going to teach insurance courses. If there was a curling club or an insurance curling club, we wanted to have a team in it. If there was a baseball league, we wanted to have a team in it. If there was a board we needed to sit on, we wanted to sit on it. We made the decision that we wanted to be as visible and out there as we possibly could. And that paid off in spades. I mean, today, if the regulator in Alberta is making a decision on insurance, they invite Peace Hills to the table. And so that was in lots of cases, it was fun if you were in the curling league or baseball league or whatever. But we had a good reputation in the industry. And often our competitors would say, there's no way Peace Hills is going to survive the High River flood, that this is going to do this company in. Well, we survived it and we grew and we've prospered and there's no way they're going to survive this catastrophe. And, they're just a small company and there's no way they'll survive this. But, after, 46 years or 44 years or whatever it is, we not only survived it, but we profited and we grew. So we were very strategic in who we appointed as brokers, and we were very strategic in being out in the industry to have an extremely good name for ourselves.
It's interesting because that was one of the things that I noticed. In some of those testimonials, brokers were getting legitimately emotional when talking about Peace Hills, which, I was a former broker. That's not common. What was it? What were some of the things do you feel that Peace Hills has done differently when building those broker relationships? Because that's not always the case. And I don't want to paint a negative light as a whole on broker and carrier relations. But it's not always the case that they have a relationship that tight. What was it from a company perspective that you think that Peace Hills did differently to build those relationships?
We were big huggers. We don't shake hands. We don't shake hands. We hug people. And that's true. If you go to a broker's conference, somebody normally will come up and shake your hand. Not if they're from Peace Hills, they'll come up and give you a hug. We make the relationship with our brokers as personal as possible. Even, going back years ago, we gave at the brokers convention. So we have, the provincial brokers conventions. We give a gift to the brokers at those conventions. When they check into their hotel room, there's a gift from Peace Hills waiting for them. And we make it as personal as possible. We've given them house coats with their names on it. We've given them, on our 25th anniversary, we've given them Christmas stockings with their names embroidered on them. We give them gifts that they take home that they can use in their homes. We did a survey when we hired a company to do a survey, and we wanted to know what the brokers thought about our culture, and if they were going to describe our culture, how would they describe it? And one of the descriptions was, Peacel's is the kind of company that you would invite home for dinner. It came naturally for me. It comes naturally for a lot of our managers to be that way. But that's the culture that we created, and that's the culture that they still work hard to maintain.
Well, what I'm hearing is this, is that a lot of times there's a trade-off between efficiency and deepening a relationship. You can be very efficient, make things very process-oriented. And I'm not saying that there wasn't some of that was there. I have no idea. I'm assuming there was, but there's a line on where efficiency is no longer going to get true productivity because the relationship's going to win on that all day. And it sounds like Peace Hills leaned into that relationship side on a very personal, not just business, but on a personal side, more than they did, let's get as efficient as we possibly can.
That's right. When you go into Peace Hills marketing room, there's baby clothes there with Peace Hills logo on it. So one of our brokers has a baby, they'll get a baby gift with Peace Hills logo on it. So and we try to make it as personal as possible. Business is tough, and business is business, and we're very good at business. But we want to be very good at building that relationship, and a strong relationship, because if you have a great relationship with your brokers, they will look after you. They won't give you shit. They won't give you bad business.
Yes. And that's, it's something that I think we see time and again in our interviews with agents and brokers, is that as much as AI is becoming a part of everything that we do, it is absolutely still that in-person personal touch, not for everything, but that still plays a very significant role and really matters. People just want to work with people they know, like, and trust.
Yes, that's exactly right. I agree with that for sure.
And so, we hit on a couple of those big things that I was curious about that really stuck out. A question that I have for you personally, and we talked about this one before, and you became CEO and were with, in that position, then also in an executive chairperson position. How did you personally continue to evolve as the company grew? Not everybody can do that. I mean, oftentimes you see a CEO for the startup stage. It's oftentimes the founder. And then a professional CEO comes in to, let's just call it 50, 100 million. And then you see another person come in. You scaled with the company. Was there anything that you felt that you had to do to continue to scale yourself? Or what did that process look like?
I remember my husband saying to me, so you have this job and now you're the CEO, and where is that going to go? Like, you have nowhere else to go. Like, you have nowhere else to grow. And I remember thinking about that for a bit. Not that it concerned me, because I found what I was doing challenging for sure. But was there going to come a time where I would reach a plateau and look for something more challenging? And very quickly I learned that as the company grew, as I was growing, and I was learning as the company was growing. I mean, it does not matter. And I'm sure it doesn't matter where you are in the insurance industry. The insurance industry is always evolving and changing and growing. And maybe I was fortunate because I was at a stage in my life where I was young enough to be able to grow with the company, to learn with the company. I had great people around me, great people. I had a team of executives that we worked so closely together, and we were very tight. So that I mean, that brought me through a lot of challenges. That brought me through a lot of, areas where I thought, oh, what the hell am I going to do here? I mean, I did not have one yes person on my executive team. Every one of those people challenged me. Every one of them, questioned my decisions. Are you sure that's, let's talk about it. Let's relook at it. Let's whatever. And at the end, and my management style has always been and always was to manage with consensus. So the only time I really had to make a real decision was if we couldn't agree on something, and then I'd have to make the final decision, of course. But and I would, I don't ever recall that I'd ever step away from making that decision. But my team was so tight around me that we worked so closely together that I didn't once feel that I didn't get us, support with the decisions that we made as an organization. And that's where I, learned that from Bill, is to lead by consensus. And we all grew with the company and that's the same today. I mean, Kathy, who is the CEO today, she started when she was 19 at Peace Hills, and she has grown with the company. And she understands that culture and the history and the legacy of the company. And she works very hard at continuing that. I think we just all grew as the company grew. We all just learned as we needed to learn.
I mean, what I'm hearing you say is that so much of that was about having a really strong leadership team, and a team that had the ability that, they both had the runway and they had the personality to challenge any of these decisions. And you as a group could have conversations until you reached the best decision. And as a result, you had the support of each other to grow, and it wasn't relying on any one person. That's essentially what I'm hearing. Is that right?
That is exactly right. That's right.
I think the last question I want to wrap this up on is, I'm sure you get people, you're part of Junior Achievement. So I know you get this question all the time. When somebody's asking you for advice, somebody, let's just say, that's really kind of rising up the ranks, and they're really talented, excited, or continuing to move up. What is that advice that you commonly give that person?
I would have to, you have to be yourself. You can't try to be someone you're not. You are strong enough and good enough to be growing in this organization and in this position. Don't try to be something that you're not. I think that would be my biggest recommendation for people. And I think that's, for me, what you see in me is what you get. I can't possibly go to the office every day and try to be somebody I'm not. So just be yourself. Be true to who you are.
I was going to say, I can attest to what you're saying, because it feels like the conversations that we've had previous to this, whether you're on the video or not the video, the conversations have felt the exact same. And so, I just want to say, Diane, thank you for coming on today, telling your story, telling Peace Hill's story. I found it to be a super interesting story, especially when I really got to dive in. And I hope we captured it on the show today, but I really personally enjoyed it. So thank you for coming on today.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks, Phil.